Revolutionary greetings and revolutionary salutations to you all, our viewers and listeners living and working in different parts of the world. My special guest today served in the government of Zimbabwe as Minister of Industry and International Trade, and much more recently, he was the presidential candidate of the Alliance for People's Agenda in Zimbabwe's 2018 general elections. Much of his works can be accessed on the links that I'm going to paste in the description panel on the upload for this video and that on our Facebook page. Dr. Nkosana Moyo, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Anotida, for the opportunity, and welcome to your listeners and fellow students.
Wonderful. I'm very much excited to have you. I was looking forward to having you on this particular series on the Zimbabwean economy. I've heard somebody from the International Crisis Group. I've heard somebody else again from Northwest University, and now I'm so excited to have you. How is work and how is your family? I understand that are you currently in Zimbabwe or in South Africa?
I'm in Harare. I've been living in Harare since 2017.
And how is work with the Nelson Mandela Development Studies? I understand you are currently serving as the executive founder and chairman.
In fact, what happened in 2017 when I decided to come and run for the presidency, in terms of good governance, I handed over the leadership of that institution to Mrs. Grasa Machel.
Wonderful. Oh, wonderful.
I'm still a trustee, and yes, I'm the founder.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. And of course, I understand as a presidential candidate, it requires you to do a lot of work that you'd actually need to be right on the ground doing so many things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful. So to get us started, I do really want us to talk about this topic, understanding the Zimbabwean economy, finance, economic planning, and policy issues. You are somebody who has had a profound career. You have had a profound professional and academic career such that your knowledge and expertise is greatly appreciated in this particular field. I have seen that you have served as vice president for the African Development Bank, and as well you have served at the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank as an associate director based in Washington, and you have had a brief stint as Minister of Industry and International Trade for the government of Zimbabwe. Can you just share with me and the audience about your experiences serving with these organizations and with the government of Zimbabwe? What major lessons can you draw that you would like to share with young people that are coming of age, that are getting into the corporate world and into politics?
Well, if you don't mind, Anotida, I would like to start somewhere slightly different, actually.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, because I think the way my mind works, I think must have been influenced clearly by my studies. I studied physics at university level. In fact, I did a PhD in material science. And I think the way I process decision making is influenced by the fact that I'm very analytical, very systematic. And all my experiences in the workspace would have been impacted by that approach to how my environment, how I look at my environment, how I experience it, and how I use those to then make decisions about the future. Very analytical and very systematic. And I think that's quite important as a starting point. That is not incidentally to denigrate any other disciplines that are different from natural sciences. I'm just recognizing that my way of looking at the world is heavily impacted by that. And of course, just to maybe make people feel that it's not better or worse than. What we need in the world is an ability to combine disciplines. So my discipline, I think, is very useful. But is it useful ultimately on its own? I think the answer would have to be no. There is a delicate dance that is required to form multidisciplinary teams which can help each other understand different facets of the human endeavor. So that's where I wanted to start from. In terms of my work experience, I think one of the key elements, in fact, it relates to what I've just said. When you are working with other people, I think you always must take into account how, as much as it's feasible, how they see the world, and be prepared to listen to them quite carefully and not try to just impose your own perception on the world at them. But equally, you must understand that when you are approaching a challenge or a problem, other people will approach exactly the same situation, but from a very different perspective. Because where their journey they've traveled, that influences them in terms of approach is very different from yours.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a responsibility to clarify how you see things and not to make an assumption that other people see it the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But equally, you've got a responsibility to listen quite carefully to the others so that you can incorporate how they see the world with how you see the world, and hopefully come up with a more integrated picture and solution of where you need to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All of my places where I've worked, essentially, if I were to boil it down to what have I learned,
Mm-hmm.
is this issue of you must have a view, it
Mm-hmm.
must be an informed view, but you must also be prepared to accept the legitimacy of other people's views, and they try to develop an integrated version,
Wonderful.
which you then work together to, yeah?
Now getting to our topic for the day, if we were to look at it back, in 2017, we had an unexpected change in terms of our political experiences as Zimbabweans. We had never seen such a thing, that a president who had served for such a long time, was all powerful, could be removed. And we had a new president who set out a new vision. Many people had high hopes. The president appointed a finance minister who came up with a transitional stabilization program that was in itself meant to feed into the broader vision of the president, that is to achieve a middle income economy by 2030. It was introduced in 2017 as a transitional stabilization program meant to be changed or to end in 2020 and then move to something else. Now, looking back at this TSP plan, to what extent has the Zimbabwean economy changed under this particular program? It is the only robust program that we've had so far. Wonderful.
You said the Minister of Finance came up with a stabilization program.
Mm-hmm.
That already is a problem. You know, if the Minister of Finance owns the program and the cabinet as a whole does not own the program, it will never work. Because by definition, a team, all the members of a team, in fact, team, the label is borrowed from sports, right? Whether it's a football team, netball team, basketball team, we know that even when we have star players in this team, the total team has to believe in the same strategy, and all the members of that team must abide by what the rules of engagement are, and equally critically, each member of the team must pull their weight in order for the team to deliver. If only one member of a team owns the strategy, believes in it, and all of the others don't even understand it, you need to understand automatically it cannot succeed. So I am not surprised at all that where we are at the moment is very different from the words that have been used to describe an aspiration, because there is no evidence to demonstrate that the members of that team were chosen in order to get the strongest team that this country can field. Again, this is another precept that you need to understand. A team strength, in fact, is equal to the weakest member of the team, like a chain, okay? A chain is as strong as its weakest link. A similar argument goes for teams. You can have star players, but as soon as you put, let's say, a goalkeeper who is not good enough, every attempt at goal is likely to succeed, in which case your team, no matter how strong it is elsewhere, will flounder and fail. So I just want for us to really, really understand that the minute you imply that the Minister of Finance owns the strategy, then that group of people, because they are not even worth being called the team, is set to fail.
What key issues can you identify within this policy framework that did not work well, maybe not implemented well, or just went wrong totally?
Well, I think part of the challenge with our country is our understanding of priorities. Priorities and sequencing. What are the key elements of what internal we need to do? What are the key elements we need to respect and understand that if we need to, because that's part of your question that you sent to me. If we want to work with the international community, what are the things which we must understand and accept in order for that engagement to be feasible? These are key two elements. So the first one is an internal dynamic. The second one is an internal to external dynamic. Both are important to get a country moving forward in today's world. So internally, we need to mobilize the population of this country. So you start from saying the minister develops, in fact, the cabinet should develop a strategy and co-own it as a whole, right? Once they've done that, they need to sell that strategy that they've come up with to the population of Zimbabwe. And the population of Zimbabwe must own it, because the population is responsible ultimately for compliance with what has been agreed as a roadmap, if you like. All of us in our daily endeavors, in everything we do, we must believe in the plan and see how we implement it in our own spheres in order for it to succeed. We must own it. Cabinet must own it. It must sell it to us as a people. We must in turn own it, and then the whole nation must be energized to implement it. That way we'll succeed. Now, for that to happen, the rest almost like follows logically. If you don't respect the population in terms of human, as evidenced through the activities in human rights, how can you then mobilize the population to own, co-own, and be energized to implement? It cannot work. So human rights are a key element in this, because they communicate cohesion of the population in the society. They communicate respect for the human society that you're operating in. That is important. The minute you don't respect human rights, you cannot at the same time expect to have cohesion and the ownership of the plan by the broad masses of the population, right? Yeah. And also, I think that when you transgress against human rights, it also shows that you fundamentally don't respect the population. But in order to be a leader to deliver for the people, you must respect the people. You must honor them. You must hold them as something that is valuable, that is a partnership. If those things are not in place, then who are you leading and for what purpose? You are a ruler, not a leader. And you are ruling for your own interest rather than for the interest of the community. Because if it was for the interest of the community, you would listen to them carefully. You would respect them. And your actions would have to demonstrate that. Yeah. And I think that when you examine what I've just said against the lived reality by the people of this country, they will say none of those things are being evidenced in the behavior of our so-called leaders, rulers in my language. Okay, so that's point number one. Issue of prioritization. Every nation has got limited resources. Nobody's got unlimited resources, which means then when you look at what needs to be done against what you have, you are always going to be forced to prioritize what comes first, what comes next, and so it goes on. And again, in your actions, in prioritization and sequencing, there is a language. Your actions communicate something to the population. They will interpret what you say against what they see you doing to see whether there is alignment and convergence in order for them to give credence to what you say. If what you do and what you say are divergent, then the population will sit back and start saying, what do we believe? What they say or what they do?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we've got limited resources, what do we use them for? So let's go back in terms of some facts, fact check. Our country's education is collapsed. Our country's health system is collapsed. Our infrastructure is collapsed. We say, the minister comes and says, I want to resuscitate the economy. Then I start looking at examples. We take the little money we have and use it for buying fleets and fleets of very expensive vehicles for the ministers.
That's not
okay,
work. Yeah.
For the officials of government, but not for the priorities according to what the people's condition demands, education and health. We say we want to resuscitate the economy and we're starting to rehabilitate the infrastructure. So we say roads, take an example of roads. You would have thought that the primary artery of the economy of this country is the Beit Bridge Road. So before we put money onto any other road, we would have put it into that road because it can then generate the resources we can use for all of the other roads, right? That's the road we are doing last.
Oh my God.
So talk to me. Talk to me.
Yeah, those are obviously misplaced priorities, if we can say.
So which do I believe? What you say or what I see you doing?
What I see you doing, of course.
Exactly.
Exactly. What I see you doing. Government is in the habit of using sanctions as the most convenient excuse for its inability to deliver on the economic front. Of course, I do acknowledge that we have had the COVID-19 pandemic. When the TSP was introduced, we didn't have the COVID-19 pandemic. It came a couple of years after. But are we at the point at which we should be scapegoating sanctions?
Okay, so let's go back to being systematic in analysis of issues. First point is sanctions do hurt because if they didn't, they wouldn't have been put in place. Okay, so let's accept that.
Yeah.
Point number two, we need to analyze as to why we ended up with the world wanting to apply sanctions
on us. Yeah, that's
what
true.
is it in our behavior that led to the world saying, you know what, these guys are behaving in a manner that is not befitting of a member of the global community, and therefore let's do this to them. We need to understand that and see what our contribution to bringing about sanctions was as a nation. We need to own it and say, okay, we understand, and therefore, if we don't want to change our ways, the implication would be we understand and accept that the world can do what it wants. We are going to continue to go on our path, which is non-compliant with what the world expects. Actions and consequences. Okay? Yeah? Having said all of that, the next thing to understand is that in life, you cannot please everybody. Not everybody is going to be your friend. Even when you do everything as well as you can to please a lot of people, there are still going to be some people who say, you know what, Nkosana, I don't like you. Therefore, I'm going to apply sanctions on you. Now, my view is that I should not live my life caught up in this world which has been created by those who don't like me. Because there is a world which is where there are certain things I can control and other things that I cannot control. I must spend my energy focused on the things I can control. And accept that there are things that I cannot control, and I'll do my best to mitigate the consequences or the impact on those things I cannot control on my life, okay? So when we, as Zimbabwean citizens, as Zimbabwean collective, look at the issue of sanctions, we should be asking ourselves a certain number of questions. I've indicated some of them already. What is it that we did which led to sanctions, okay? Point number one. Point number two, we should be saying, what is it that we can do to make our country work in spite of sanctions? Because there are certain things we can control and there are others we cannot control. Are we demonstrating that we are using our own resources in a manner that shows incredible prudence and understanding of priorities. Are we doing that?
We're not.
So we should not confuse the debate. Sanctions or no sanctions, there are certain questions we must ask of ourselves. There are certain demands we must put on ourselves in terms of how we manage the little resource that we have to best advantage. If we don't do that, in my humble opinion, we've got no business putting an emphasis on sanctions. That's my view.
For nearly 20 years, Zimbabwe has been in default of something like over 9 billion worth of international debt, and the debt needs restructuring, probably with the assistance of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. You've been there, you've worked there, and you know, you are somebody who has got much more knowledge and know-how of how it works than the ordinary person in the street, and probably young people who have not seen how much exposure. Why and how have our government accrued and accumulated so much debt, you know, to such levels and to such extents? And how best can we as citizens be able to put in place measures that can make our governments more accountable in terms of how they spend?
How have we got into, how have we, I use the collective we because we are a nation, okay?
Sure.
How have we as a nation got where we are? Again, we go back to the things I was talking about, lack of prioritization. One of the key elements about running any situation, whether it's your household, a company, a country, is that their finances, their books to be balanced. You've got income, and you've got revenues, and you've got expenditure. And there is nobody who is exempt from the fact that you cannot spend beyond what you can earn. And ultimately, if you do that, you're going to get into trouble. So it's this delicate balance of always being on top and understanding a basic rule of finance or economics. You spend what you have or what you're going to earn. If you don't respect that, you're going to get into debt and ever increasing debt. That's what we've done. We failed to understand we need to build a robust economy, because a robust economy creates the wealth that we can then use elsewhere. The surpluses of what we can use in education, in health, in infrastructure, and all of the other things which requires you to spend money must come from the productive side. Since independence, I have to say, we've never as a nation been totally clear about prioritizing the production side. We started at independence with a very mistaken view of distributing what we thought was there, because we imagined there was a lot of money that Ian Smith had, and we did not pay attention into the fact that we now own the levers of the economy, and were to make the economy work first before we got carried away with the expenditure side. So we rushed and did some good things, but we just didn't pay attention that they were not sustainable without taking care of the production side. Under Mugabe, education system expanded immensely. The health system expanded immensely. But like I say, although these in themselves were good things, they were done at a level which was not sustainable because we did not take care of the production side. We continuously are doing the same. You can see government today spends money like it's going out of fashion. Go back to the things they spend money on. Very unproductive expenditure. Buying very expensive vehicles, but not taking care of the economy. Go back to the Minister of Finance. Tell me one thing since he came into office, which he has done to prioritize the economy coming stronger in order for the economy to be able to carry the burden of what we need to spend. One thing, tell me, which one? Everything he's done is to try to tax more and more and more in order for government to spend on silly expenditure. That is not how you run a country. That's actually not the way you run anything. Okay?
The minister always says we are enjoying budget surpluses now and then. We are making so much, but it doesn't correspond at all with the kind of problems that we are facing. We have some huge debt in terms of the electricity that we use in the country. And sometimes you fail to see where the money is going. If we do have a budget surplus, then where is the money being spent on? If we are actually having this budget surplus, is it real or
you've put your finger on it, and I'm glad you have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all these things, like, you know, it can be a surplus or a budget deficit. It doesn't really matter in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on what you're doing with your money. Are you putting your money into things that are going to increase your capacity to service your obligations or not?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you putting your money into things that just create more and more obligations because you're buying things that require more expenditure and they don't produce any income?
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly the question you ask.
Mm-hmm.
That's the question to ask him. A surplus. And so, well done, Mr. Minister. Can you help us understand where the money is going, which is going to produce money, more money for us to then deploy in future? Let's see what he says.
Mm-hmm. He says we are subsidizing ZUPCO. We are trying by all means to to help our struggling population such that it can be able to access things like transport, things like food. I'm not sure if there is a subsidy program on food, but I'm sure of ZUPCO.
Well, and what is ZUPCO going to produce which helps us to meet obligations? They say ZUPCO, and they stop all the minibuses that, in fact, were running and carrying passengers.
Exactly.
They stopped all of them.
Mm-hmm.
because there is a cartel that owns the ZUPCO buses, and that's what they're trying. That's who they're subsidizing, not the Zimbabwean consumer.
Mm-hmm.
They are subsidizing some silly businessman to make them make more and more money. But there is nothing that is going into the economy to make it more productive in order to meet the nation's obligations, like I say.
Mm.
So it's a lot of rubbish, and you can see through it. I'm glad you can.
Wonderful, wonderful. What a nice time we've had. Dr. Nkosana Moyo, I do have to say thank you very much. I'm afraid we are running out of time, but let me extend my profound thanks to you for joining me on this show. Viewers and listeners, this was Dr. Nkosana Moyo. He previously served in the government of Zimbabwe as Minister of Industry and International Trade, and much more recently, he was the presidential candidate for the Alliance for People's Agenda in Zimbabwe's 2018 general elections. He is also currently the founder and the executive chairman of Nelson Mandela Development Studies. I'm very much happy to have heard you, Dr. Nkosana, and have a good day.
Same to you. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and bye to your listeners.
Wonderful. Thank you.